Hello and welcome to another political debate or talk or chat, whatever you want to call it, with distinguished guests of mine. My guests, first of all, to introduce them. Sinan Ciddi is non-resident senior fellow at Foundation for Defense of Democracies, in short, FDD, expert on Turkish domestic and international policies. Welcome, Sinan.
Hi, it was good to see you.
And Cengiz Aktar in Athens. Aktar is a political scientist, analyst, and columnist, writer of numerous books, latest being called The Turkish Malaise, published in 2021. Like Sinan, Cengiz is another distinguished expert on Turkish domestic and international policies. Both of my guests, and I'm Yavuz Baydar, editor and journalist. Both of my guests are known for their outspokenness, for their sharp foresight, and oftentimes not bold enough to swim against the stream, staying out of the mainstream and sticking to the facts. And both are also known for their predictions in the national elections, which ended with the great upset for the Turkish opposition last May, presidential and parliamentary elections. This, in a way, resulted, including myself, I can count myself also in that sphere, sort of a cancel culture because of the all illusionism, all sort of appeasement, wishful thinking sort of analysis, led to and helped cause a great trauma for the Turkish electorate. Again, I must say I was a little bit hesitant about, again, coming into another debate preceding the local elections due on Sunday. But again, this is, as public intellectuals and journalists and academicians, this is our intellectual duty to the Turkish public, Turkish society, and international public as well, to bring in and shed light on various vantage points of what's at stake in Turkey in the local elections. So let's start with what is happening now, where we are, where Turkey is in just days before, hours before the Turkish local elections, with Istanbul as its epicenter. It will be a defining election there. And what to expect later on, as in the second phase of our talk. Let's begin with you, Sinan, because you have been, again, back to outspokenness with your commentary, etc. You have to face a lot of accusations and smearing, etc., for your stand, for your staunch stand. And from that vantage point, please give us your take on what is at stake.
Thank you, Yavuz, for the introduction. It's great to be with all of you and so much more experienced colleagues. And I'm looking forward to listening to your perspectives on this. I mean, yes, you know, I don't mind so much. My goal is not so much to be outspoken, so as much as really try to relay what my experience and my training and my read of Turkish politics has led me to. So this wasn't a sort of glory run for us by any stretch of the imagination, but it has been a bit of a whiplash for all sort of parties concerned here, as well as some other colleagues who had somewhat divergent takes from, let's just say, a more rosy scenario that came out last year. And so, you know, the aim is, as you say, absolutely is to provide all sides of the story and all sides of what could essentially transpire, because we don't have a crystal ball and know exactly what's going to happen. But you know, if we, you know, to set the scene,
it's not our primary duty either. We are not sort of, right, you know, clairvoyance, but you know, fact-based analysis is again, I must say, what's missing here.
Yeah, I mean, and if we were to look, you know, to Sunday, you know, the international press has sort of downplayed the potential outcome of these elections and implications, because they basically see Erdoğan has essentially circled all the wagons up until now, and that essentially that he's consolidated his regimes, and the local election that's coming up is sort of interesting, but not like last year in terms of when Erdoğan was personally running. I somewhat disagree with that, but I also understand the international sort of media's sort of reluctance to get onto this unless there's a big sort of, development, a fiasco. But I would say a couple of things that we could sort of start the discussion with is I think the focus of attention of these local elections will be on the two major cities, the capital Ankara and Turkey's biggest city, Istanbul, which I think is the focus, the absolute dream of Erdoğan to consolidate and win back most, although other big cities are also at play. And I think I would say that to the extent of what happens, I would say if Erdoğan fails to essentially win Istanbul and Ankara, I don't see that so much as a win for Imamoğlu, as much as I do really launching Imamoğlu into the fray of national politics, if that wasn't already achieved last year. But this really will set the scene for for politics going forward, because Imamoğlu will be seen as the man. He is defying all polls in terms of possible outcomes, depending on which you will look at. So if he is successful in holding on to Istanbul, I think Erdoğan's going to have some hard questions to ask. If he loses, if Imamoğlu loses, I think all eyes will be on what will Erdoğan do next. Where will he take the country, given that he's won back Turkey's most prosperous and populous city, and in addition to if he manages to snag Ankara as well as some other big cities. So there's a lot riding on this reputationally, and I think there's a lot riding on this in terms of which direction the country can go from here on in.
There are now about 11 million voters expected to the ballot boxes on Sunday in Istanbul, and Imamoğlu versus Murat Kurum from the AKP, but de facto it's Imamoğlu versus President Erdoğan. There is an agreement on this. Also, the outcome will be defining in a way what the future of the political class and political parties will be, as far as I see it. But back to Cengiz, to you this time. Any agreements, disagreements with Sinan's take?
Yavuz, let me underline what you told us in the very beginning. You mentioned the intellectual duty. We are public intellectuals and we have a duty. We are not snake oil sellers. And this happened last year during this election period, the general plus presidential elections. And we were literally, as you said, canceled before and after, because we were we were making our, observations, facts based on facts. And all the other, the majority of those who were predicting, a landslide victory of the opposition failed. I'm extremely concerned with that. We are living in a very difficult world where the news are systematically manipulated. So I'm almost tempted to use the formula of fake news for this, for these people who fool around both domestically and for the outside world to tell, just fake realities. And the problem is that afterwards they don't recognize that they failed. And we are again at the same juncture. We are at the same point. I think before going into details of the very election now on Sunday, I think one should understand that in Turkey there is a hegemonic totalitarian regime. Whatever the outcome of the elections now on the 31st of March, this regime will continue. Will consolidate through a tailor-made constitution. There will be new, horse trading by, from parties like İYİ Party of Meral Akşener, who may join the ruling coalition, but in no way, these elections will have a bearing on the, on the future of the regime, even less on the future of President Erdoğan. I mean, there are people...
Regardless of the result, you mean?
Sorry?
Regardless of the result.
Exactly. I mean, I would like to underline and remind our, listeners a very fact. These are local elections. Probably the most democratic elections in the country. But because, they are direct elections in a way, but, in Turkey, there is no local governance. There is no local policy. I mean, Turkey is a hyper centralized state. There is an administrative tutelage according to the Article 127 of the Constitution. Anyone can go and read it. And the central government has every single saying over the elected local officials. One. Two, in Turkey, never ever in the history of the elections since 1946, no local election had any bearing at national level. So why now? I mean, I know why. Because people want to continue to dream, to continue to have, the wishful thinkings, because they are sick and tired. I understand this also. But I mean, our role is not that. Our role is to tell, an objective narrative, according to the facts we have. So this is our duty, and I think we should continue along these lines. And we will continue probably about the outcome. But this is, I think, for the time being, this is one I would like to underline.
Yeah, can I just interject here briefly and just touch upon something Cengiz said, which I agree with. What we're seeing again in a few sort of pre-election sort of panel takes that I've listened to over the last couple of days by different analysts, both some American-based and some Turkey-based, again, is this narrative that people, analysts or journalists have attended like election rallies in Istanbul and Ankara, that they have sniffed the air, and and this was sort of peddled in the presidential election of May last year. And the point was driven home quite forcefully last year, telling people like me who are on the outside, saying, you haven't been to, listen to some of these, you haven't sort of felt the atmosphere, the energy for desires for change. And the first thing as a political scientist, with weak scores on my methodology class, I should add, was to basically say, look, just because you attend one, two, several, dozens of election rallies is not representative of a national sample in terms of what voters will do. And precisely, and more importantly, as Cengiz said, the structural factors that lay on top of this, right, regardless of voter sentiment, right, the unfair playing field, the media sort of capture by the state, and as you say, all the sort of authoritarian measures that they put into place, such as illegally fielding cabinet ministers to campaign, or bureaucrats who are not elected officials, right, seems to suggest that at some level, right, that voter sentiment is not the determinative driver of what happens, right, and so sniffing elections. And this thing really gets under, crawls under my skin a little bit, simply because this is not valid information, right? Listening to talking to 5 people at an election rally in Gazi Osman Pasha is about this equivalent of me watching on YouTube street interviews done by sort of street journalists in Turkey. There is no difference, and it is not a reliable outcome of what is going to transpire.
Mm-hmm. There is. If we ask ourselves what has changed since May defeat for the opposition, May last year, one of the distinguished facts rise as the great apathy or fatigue, as they call it, which also was covered and underlined by a latest news story by The Guardian from the field. And there is now, Sinan, new sort of explanation that I see and hear lately, that fatigue may be something disillusioning in terms of explaining the end of polarization in Turkey, depolarization, as some may call it. Do you agree with that analysis?
No, I think that's somewhat wishful thinking.
Is there a decline in polarization in Turkey as you notice?
I don't think so, but I haven't conducted any sort of field research, and so I can't speak in terms of numbers. This is essentially just looking at the country in terms of like, it doesn't explain why, despite everything that's going on in Turkey, at least 40%, or if there was a national election held tomorrow, that at least 40% of the country are going to vote for Erdoğan, no matter what he does, right? It doesn't matter. To touch upon this, because I've spoken a little bit too much, this notion of apathy, and maybe Cengiz can weigh on this better than I can. I'm a little upset because I wrote about this a few days ago, and this is my take on the public. Yes, the public are frustrated, and they have a right to be. The average voter in Turkey who is disillusioned, upset, economically downtrodden, it just doesn't have hope for the future, or it's just whatever, right? I understand that if they don't see politics or the political field as offering them solutions, makes sense, and I have full sympathy and empathy for them. They are not they are not wrong. The one thing that I would cite that accounts for apathy, that drives this, right, is the role of the critical media. Or the independent media, what remains of it. And I'm absolutely flabbergasted in terms of how they report on this. They still do the same thing. And actually, it's mirrored in American politics too, right? Which is the portrayal of this race as a sort of equal horse race between two mutually sort of weighted candidates, right? Faith like Imamoğlu versus Kurum, or Yavaş versus the Ankara guy. I can't remember he's such a non-entity, but I've forgotten his name, right? And basically makes no accounting for the fact that that the structural playing field in how elections are conducted are completely to the advantage on one side of the incumbent and not the incumbent, sorry, the government. There is no attempt to inform voters or provide a venue for voters by the critical press in terms of, for example, the fact that opposition candidates get no coverage, right, by TRT, the state broadcaster, right? There is not even a mention, right, of, when we look at, let's say, the role of Erdoğan and when he was running for president last year, little to no discussion that his candidacy for president and his incumbency as president is totally illegal, according to the constitution of the Republic of Turkey, from numerous angles. If you do not point this out to voters and really sort of lay stark bare what they are looking at in the field, then they cannot make informed choices. And when they can't make informed choices and they go to the polls and they see a result that they are hugely dissatisfied with, I think that is a major concern, a turnoff for for people. And I'll end on this, and we just saw this today, yesterday. One major sort of independent platform that that articulates itself as an independent media critical source in Turkey. I'm not going to say the name because what's the point? It takes advertising from the AKP. It's right there up on its webpage. I don't know what to say at this point. So.
There is this dimension that remains unchanged compared to last May elections, which we then also, I myself, as a former news ombudsman, the keen observer of all the changes that take place, or the capture that has been in slow motion since 2013, Gezi especially, that I noticed that. That is what remains unchanged is the sharp, entrenchment within the media, the lack of, as you mentioned, a lack of the center, mainstream, independent reporting, the old style, good old journalism that was missing then, and that is going to be missing now. That is missing now, especially, again, I'm afraid we will be witnessing on the election night, the partisanization of Turkish media, which started to take place before May elections, meaning the large segment of the pro-government, up to 93% of the media sector, versus a tiny but equally partisan and acrimonious less interested in reporting than shouting back, in fight with the large segment of the pro-government media. In this kind of spectrum or picture, the journalism gets lost. It got lost. It misled the viewers and it misled the public in general. Then, as it is now, with the repetition of the same mistakes, sticking to these old non-journalistic habits, it will be again causing a lot of further disappointment. Election night will be another stage. As Deutsche Welle Turkish put a question, correctly in one of the stories today, on Friday, will there be again sort of data flow chaos on 31st of Sunday night? The answer is definitely yes, because as you mentioned, the state broadcaster TRT and also the Anatolian agency versus the tiny and equally partisan Anka agency, which then in May that night fought against each other with different sorts of data, which led to a total confusion, anger, and also trauma the day after. So this is the same repetition of the same patterns. Regarding polarization, back to polarization again. I mean, we are seeing now again the pro-Kurdish Dem party, especially in sort of dilemma whether what to do with their voters in Istanbul, but also in terms of clinging to the identity politics in all parties. But Cengiz, also what we saw as another change since May elections last year, the disunity, dissolution of the 6-party, 7-party, 8-party political opposition. This is something different compared to May. So can you put everything into the context of whether or not polarization or depolarization? Where is the Turkish society now as, again, the voters go to the election polling stations?
I would like to make a few observations regarding the in line with what you just said, the voters' behavior. On the one hand, as Sinan just mentioned, we have a block of almost 40% of the population, and who vote, obediently for the regime. This is why in my writings, in my talks, I call Turkey as a totalitarian country, because this is the very definition, according to Hannah Arendt, of a totalitarian regime. It has mass support, and it's not a dictatorship. It's more complicated than that. So it's a bit like Nazi Germany or fascist Italy or Soviet Union, communist Soviet Union. So this is extremely important, and these people vote whatever happens. I mean, today, after the May elections, many observers in the country and outside ask themselves this, billion-dollar question: but how come, this population continued to vote despite this horrible earthquake and the horrible economic conditions? I mean, we were talking about this since years. I mean, this is a captive electorate. And this is the definition of the mass support. These people will continue to vote Erdoğan whatever it happens. So, and they don't understand this. I just read a few days ago, one of your colleagues, Deniz Zeyrek, and there are others also. I mean, how come they continue to vote? I mean, this is political sociology, and all these snake oil sellers in Turkey, they don't talk about this because they still think and hope that Turkey is a normal country. Turkey is not a normal country. Turkey is an abnormal country, and this is how it should be understood. So, second point regarding the mass and the Erdoğan, I mean the regime voters, many of them maybe they are not happy, but they tend to say, better the devil you know, because they don't, that's exactly what they said in May. As for the so-called opposition, what your point regarding the six party table, blah blah blah. I mean, this was again a fake news. I mean, this was an invention, a creation of some mavericks, pretending, and they were calling this six party who were not at all, having the same principles and values, the democratic opposition. You remember? I mean, they disappeared, and they will disappear even more after the 34th of March. This is my.
Well, they did not disappear. They were at each other's throats.
Of course, they are cashing their MP salaries, absolutely. But as for the voters in general, I think we can easily talk about a disengagement or a depolitization. Many people won't go to the ballot boxes, and you mentioned you use the formula apathy. I think we can use another formula is resignation. I mean, they have given up, and they want to survive. Many of them, I mean, this Kemalist opposition I'm talking about, the classical opposition, not the Kurds. The Kurds, it's a totally different thing. But this Kemalist, they either try to survive in this environment through all sorts of means. They are all involved in some kind of art loving. They are all in the exhibitions and here and there, and because they don't want to see the reality, and many of them have developed B plans, C plans. Those who have kids, they are leaving the country. I mean, no one talks about that. Apparently, according to the MI6, some 2.5 million people left Turkey since the so-called coup d'etat of 2016. I mean, these are Turkish realities. And without them, we will never understand where Turkey is heading in 2024.
One thing I wanted to ask you, you spoke about the monobloc remaining devoted to the ruling party, AKP. But there is a discourse now, and there is some data telling us that the AKP is bleeding. It's not any longer a party which enjoys 40+% of voter segments, but now it's somewhere between, if the data is correct, 35%. So still, there is some change. There is some maybe electoral change. But again, against the backdrop of that, I think we should add the solid level of undecided and protest voters, which is also another result of the May elections, remaining constantly, obstinately about 20+%. So how do we explain that? It's certainly.
You know what? I mean, my expectation after the elections is that this Yeniden Refah, the old political Islam representative party of the late Erdoğan, led by his son, this party will, yes, Yeniden Refah, Refah again, whatever. They will make a sizable score apparently. And the next move of Erdoğan will definitely be to bring them in the ruling coalition. This is what I'm expecting, because they cannot survive, for 4 years, exactly for E-Party, by the way, 4 years, just without, having any, privileges, etc. They would love to have privileges. And we know that Erdoğan is feeding, both Saadet and Yeniden Refah Party, top executives, their families, etc. That will be they will, okay, we would like to listen to what you are saying about Turkey. Just join us, and where to go otherwise? This party of 3-4%, can it survive in the Turkish, environment completely dominated by the regime? Of course not.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah, I was just going to ask
based
you
on that
about
question, otherwise I'll forget. Just 2 minor points. Well, I agree. I think the AKP is melting, and it just underscores the fact that without Erdoğan, the AKP is nothing. And in that way, it resembles many sort of other iconic parties that we saw in the past, like ANAP, the motherland party of Turgut Özal. It really is not going to survive past Erdoğan. And I agree.
I would also add, let me add my own observation that Erdoğan cares much less about his own AKP party than before, because he's now the head of the state. That sort of, state bureaucracy, that the state that he constructed and engineered, rather than he has control over parliament, and the AKP is another one of those actors under him. And maybe that's an observation that I would argue for, but continue, please.
I agree. He cares more about himself than anyone else, which is why I think he's made a really strategic blunder in terms of nominating real non-entity candidates for some of these highline city elections, such as, Istanbul, Ankara, non-entities. And basically he figures that he doesn't want a strong personality leading these cities. But I want to underline something that Cengiz said, minutes ago in one of his opening things, because I think it situates this sort of, this notion of the bloc. You're talking about the 40%, whatever. I agree with Cengiz, and I think nobody's really saying this right now, regardless of whether Imamoğlu wins, Ankara, Istanbul, if the CHP holds on to it, whatever. I agree that it does not have any bearing on the regime's ability to continue consolidating its regime. It is not dependent upon this local election before it decides to draft a new constitution or, repave some of sort of the legislative and legal impediments, such as the Supreme Court in Turkey, that it finds annoying to whatever it wants to do in terms of really setting its imprint in the country.
So it won't stop its course. Local elections won't stop.
No, I don't think so. But I will add one proviso, and I can't see past this because we don't know. Is this what Cengiz outlines and what I agree with overall holds until Erdoğan is out of the picture. If Erdoğan dies tomorrow, or somehow is incapacitated, or just if Erdoğan is politically out of the picture, the ability to consolidate the regime will melt because there'll be so many forces inside of the regime vying for power that it will come to a screeching halt, and then we'll see a political sort of circus, right? Comparable, but I think worse than what we saw during the mid-1990s, right? When we saw 10 governments in less than 9 years, right? Because no political personality essentially has the ability to, whether Bilal, Berat Albayrak or Süleyman Soylu, doesn't matter who they nominate. None of these people have what Erdoğan has, and I think that sort of ability to consolidate really falls apart if Erdoğan is out of the picture. At least it's really uncertain what will happen subsequent to that.
Okay, let's.
One point there.
Yes.
Can I add? Yes. What I'm expecting after the elections, as I already said, I mean, a tailor-made constitution. I'm sure they have drafted it already, and they will impose it to the so-called parliament. And I'm expecting a re-centralization or a consolidation, regrouping all the so-called, parties which have emanated from the AKP in the past. The Gelecek, maybe not the DEVA, but I mean, they are insignificant anyhow.
E-Party.
Definitely. Yeniden Refah, Saadet, and all of them, they will constitute the new party basis of the regime. This is my expectation. In that sense, you are definitely right. AKP doesn't mean anything for Erdoğan anymore. I mean, he used it, he abused it, and now he threw it away. Now, I mean, he has a much larger basis, you know, both party-wise and ideology-wise. I mean, these parties, frankly, you know, they are completely interchangeable, including some of the CHP, the so-called opposition, you know, figures. They can perfectly be within the ruling coalition of Turkey. And I'm expecting, as a new strong man, not at all one of this, you know, boys and girls of the family, but Hakan Fidan. I have the feeling that Erdoğan is busy preparing Hakan Fidan for his succession. He will be a kind of, you know, as you said, Yavuz, you know, he's the head of state. I mean, he will be even more than that. You know, he will be a kind of Deus ex machina. And the Hakan is, frankly, in my opinion, the right person, thanks to his internal, domestic, and external, you know, networks, to be that man who would rule Turkey in the decade to come, at least until 2028.
The clock is ticking. Let's go again back to Sunday. And one of the, you know, sort of puzzling elements in this whole picture has been the sort of growing divide within the pro-Kurdish Dem Party, and especially its stand on the Istanbul elections, because they were the enablers of Imamoğlu win in 2019 to a large extent, along with the E-Party voters. More than half of, if the data is correct, then HDP, pro-Kurdish HDP voters, voted for Imamoğlu, helped him bring to mayorship. But this time the story is different, because the grassroots of the Dem Party for weeks and weeks, making it clear that they want to see their own candidates. And the Dem Party could not resist that. So in many, many provinces, there are Dem Party candidates. Even in the critical Istanbul, they have Murat Kurum and Meral Danış Beştaş. But here the dilemma or the puzzling picture starts. While one flank of the party staunchly tries to steer its voters to voting for Imamoğlu again, the other flank is doing the same, doing the opposite. So this dilemma, we will see the result of this on Sunday. But regardless of how they vote in Istanbul, a turmoil is expected for the Dem Party, regardless of the result from Monday on. Because it is causing sort of an unprecedented rift, if we call it, not yet rift perhaps, but getting there. So how, in short, do you explain why Dem Party leadership, the Kurdish movement in general, fell into this sort of dilemma? What is the aim, and what do you expect on Sunday? Starting with Sinan.
Good questions. I would say a couple of things on this, but I'll defer to Cengiz because, you know, the Kurdish bloc is not my forte in electoral analysis. But I would have two things to say. You're right. You know, Imamoğlu's victory in 2019, crushing victory in 2019, was based in large part with the Kurdish vote that really pushed them over the edge and really sort of delivered a death blow to the AKP's desire to hold on to Istanbul. This time around, obviously, you know, they feel that they want to, you know, they should get more out of, you know, opting to side with Imamoğlu again, but it's not happening. And to the extent that, you know, to some extent, you know, Imamoğlu's hands are tied by the party itself, the CHP itself. But the other problem that Dem has, as you correctly suggest, in terms of the turmoil that's about to come, is You know, the Dem candidate for Istanbul is not a bad candidate. You know, she has pretty good skills. She's not a bad candidate. She's a great candidate to field as far as Dem can put out. The problem is what from one poll I've seen, which is Metropole, you know, Özer Sancar's one, suggests that just over 50% of Kurds in Istanbul will vote for Imamoğlu because they've been practical. They're tired of these sort of promissory notes by the party establishment, suggesting that, you know, if you just vote for who we point at, then we're going to miraculously achieve our political ambitions. Because the Dem is sort of, as I understand, is interested in continuing to have these quote unquote negotiations with the regime in terms of see if there's going to be a peace solution or peace process again, which I think is fantasy once again. From my perspective, I just see this as like the regime just playing with the Kurds again, simply because after the election, forget about launching a peace process. Are we in any doubt here that they're going to reappoint, you know, imposed governors on the southeastern provinces, even if they elect Kurdish mayors? I don't, and let's not forget Erdogan's already said that Turkey is about to launch a new military incursion into Iraq and Syria. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Cengiz, one point I want to insert this, you know, posing the same question to you. In 2015 elections, thanks mainly to Selahattin Demirtas' charisma and discourse, you know, the Kurdish party then had 13+ % of the vote. And from then on until today, it was a constant decline of the Kurdish vote. And now, if the predictions are right, very few of the pollsters are to believe, but in average, we are talking about 4%, 4+, 4- in Istanbul, and regardless of the mainly Kurdish provinces. But overall, nationwide, because Dem party wanted to be a Turkey's party, this decline will stick, and then I am predicting that the people, the devoted voters of the Kurdish parties, Dem party, will start asking, we are here now, so low, what do we have this party for? And this, simply put, the man on the woman on the street will ask this question. And then also there may be some developments to Erdogan's liking, or to the regime's liking, to the right-wing state bureaucracy's liking. Yeah. The same question, nevertheless, to you. What do you say? Dilemma.
Erdogan was in Diyarbakir and he said, stop your support to PKK, meaning them, and we are ready to talk. I mean, that was, again, I mean, this kind of messages he has given in the past several times. Well, I mean, you are both definitely right. I mean, the party, like all parties actually in a way in the opposition, are is striving to survive. And I am expecting that one of the serious casualties of the next Sunday's elections will be the Dem, and the party is split clearly, and how this can continue while in the opposition and under heavy pressure by the regime and the Turkish Turkish military, who are readying to to start an operation in after the elections in April in Iraq. And well, I mean, this is, there are too many, frankly, information and contradictory, information and pulling in all directions to to help the party to stay put and in one piece, frankly. I mean, these are, in the political sociology, these are the, clear and classical outcomes of a hegemonic power base, which is the regime, of course. They are just playing with everyone as much as they can. And the other point is this, what Sinan mentioned, this fantasy, which again, like in every single elections the last 10 years probably, came again, in the press or in the public opinion, the so-called peace process. I mean, come on. I mean, the whole serious people say, I mean, they are preparing for war, what peace? I mean, this is, and I mean, again, I mean, wishful thinking, loss of all, frankly, objectives, and actually in a kind of powerlessness. And I think the silence of Selahattin Demirtas is very evocative. I mean, this is, and for the first time, I mean, we still have tomorrow, Saturday. He can still talk, of course. We never know. But this time he was very, very silent, and that tells us a lot. I mean, this is, yeah.
Okay, let's wrap it up with the day after. What to expect from Monday on? The scenario, vaguely, I would describe from my side is this. It's a neck-to-neck race in Istanbul, as we see it. And then given the Kurdish element, still unknown, let's leave that unknown at one side, but pension holders, pretty high in Istanbul, are disgruntled, and they may refrain from going to ballot boxes, or they may protest vote for Yeniden Refah welfare, new welfare party. And that may lead to the loss of, or the opposition keeping Istanbul, Imamoğlu winning. In this case, I expect even harder times, tougher times from Monday on. This will definitely infuriate the palace, and also, as indicated already, there are some files and accusations and allegations about wrongdoing of Imamoğlu. And there's also a pending case in appeals court, I suppose, istinaf, about Imamoğlu. They may, and Erdoğan may trigger this legal process to make life hard for him. On the other hand, also, if Imamoğlu wins, CHP will be also finding itself in turmoil, but being epicenter of web of intrigues, nobody knows what such an outcome would lead to in the party, and also the Kurdish party, as we mentioned. So if Kurum wins, AKP candidate, Erdoğan's candidate, we can also, as I understand also from your commentary, we can also wait for consolidation of the current construction, current architecture of power. That's how I see it. It's between the rock and the hard place, in other words, perhaps, both opposition, and also to a deal with the Erdoğan, the Kurdish movement, excuse me. Sinan, final words, what to expect from the results? How do you see the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to call. I agree with you, because we see such varied polling data. We'll just have to see, and I think it's closer than people think, or some of the polls put out. I think we'll have to see. But a couple of things to mention that I would like to mention. Regardless of what happens, if we just look at the framing of this election, how voters have been approached with this, and the decisions they've been made to ask. One of the things I've noticed is Erdoğan's greatest accomplishment in the last presidential and now this local election cycle is he is setting the parameters of what people demand. I see nowhere in the public domain a citizenry which is demanding accountability for reckless government for the last at least 10 to 15 years of corruption, nepotism, murderous behavior by this government, just a complete kleptocracy that has ruined the economy, the social and political and economic fabric of the country. I don't see in street interviews or people talking about in the mainstream critical press saying we want an accountability and justice and wanting to overturn this. What we see, and this is Erdoğan's greatest accomplishment, is bargaining for who's going to give them more pay raises, whether it's the minimum income in the country or whether pensioners are going to get raises. They're not looking for rule of law or substantive government change. They're literally holding their hands open to Erdoğan in an Oliver Twist style, saying, what are you going to give me? And this is the greatest tragedy for change in Turkey, I think, but also Erdoğan, the greatest accomplishment. He has set these parameters. That's the first thing I would mention. The second thing I'll mention is, let's say, what I would like to see personally, if let's say Imamoğlu and Yavaş hold on to Ankara, then what we will likely see is a silent Erdoğan for a while, right? That's just a prediction. I don't know this, right? Because we're speculating at this point. A silent, just Erdoğan disappears. How many hours has it been since we heard from him? If he forcibly removes, Imamoğlu, a legitimately elected mayor, by this court, implementing the appeals court decision, or which is the most likely track, I'm not saying he'll shy away from doing that. I mean, we know that the more cornered Erdoğan gets, the more offensive he is. We saw that in Gezi. We saw that following 2016. This guy does not shy away from a fight. I'm not sure about the protest potential of citizens in Turkey. The law enforcement apparatus has had time to prepare, and I'm sure they have contingencies, right? I'm just not sure how much of a fight the population has if they feel that they have been severely wronged at this time in this atmosphere where they're hurting so much. I have no necessary confidence in that. But to just balance against that, I would also say, Erdoğan's decision to rerun the 2019 Istanbul election, just to sort of see if he can, eke out a win over Imamoğlu. It's not 2019. 2019 was not a great economic or political landscape for Erdoğan, but it's better than now, right? He really has to calculate, and I'm sure he has a good pulse on the nation in terms of, his polling, he's very good on data and sort of, I still think he doesn't shy away from a fight, because I can't see him looking weakened and sort of, introspectively saying, what have I done wrong? And, sort of, draft a pathway for him to exit politics. I think he's a fighter. I think he's still got it left in him. I think he will find it very difficult to accept an Imamoğlu and Yavaş win. That being said, the conditions under which he will have to do this, to hold on to those cities forcibly, are not as easy as they were in 2019.
Cengiz, final word.
Three very quick brief points. Yes, one is, we should never forget about the vote rigging. The Turkish electoral system is rigged from the top to the bottom, and we should always keep this in mind. The second point is regarding Imamoğlu. If he wins, my expectation is that, you mentioned it, Erdoğan cannot coexist with a serious potential challenger. This is exactly what happened to Selahattin Demirtas, and Imamoğlu is on his way to become Selahattin Demirtas 2.0, and that is not possible. So he will use all the powers he has as the top ruler of the center to dismiss him in one way or another, and kill him, like Selahattin Demirtas forever. Politically kill him. This is where, this is definitely one of the scenarios. We will see how it will work.
Even if Imamoğlu gathers enough powers to gather around the rest of the opposition bloc and gets the support including
it's even better.
Even if that.
It will give Erdoğan more excuses and arguments to kill him politically. So, and no one will, I'm not expecting anybody, the group of people, I don't want to call them masses, but the opposition to protest against this eventuality. And this is the main problem of the country. And Sinan mentioned it. I extensively write about this. This is a 100 years old irresponsibility, inaccountability, and amnesia. It dates back to the Armenian genocide, and this country, despises the rule of law, and people will send, SMS messages and WhatsApp and Instagram pictures to protest against the dismissal of Ekrem Imamoğlu, it will last 3 days.
Well, if anything else to add, I will wrap it up here. And we were discussing the upcoming local elections in Turkey, seen as important as any general elections in Turkey, because the country's future is at stake. And therefore, it is seen as a huge public survey in a way, because its impact to the central politics in Ankara will be less than imagined, but it will also give us a picture of where the Turkish society stands on 20 plus years of AKP management. My guests were Sinan Ciddi, non-resident senior fellow at Foundation for Defense of Democracies, FTD, and expert on Turkish and domestic politics in Turkey, and also Cengiz Aktar, a political scientist, analyst, and author of numerous books, expert on Turkey as well. Thank you for this conversation, Cengiz and Sinan.
Thank you.